think the first thing I always tell folks is to really audit the work that is being asked of you, right? Is it, this huge amount of effort with low visibility? Are you the person taking notes in the room that no one's supposed to see? Or, is it something that you're saying yes to do when you don't really need to say yes? Like, really be honest with yourself. And if you have to, talk to someone, and have someone that is a sounding board for you, because sometimes you can't get out of your own way of thinking.
Welcome to You Might Try This, a podcast about learning how to lead without losing yourself along the way. Hosted by executive coaches Stacey, Philpot, and Cade, Cowan. This show draws on 25 years of experience working with high-level leaders and brings those lessons down to earth. If you're navigating leadership for the first time, managing people, questioning old rules, and trying to build a career that actually feels good, you're in the right place. This is You Might Try This. Honest leadership advice for ambitious people who still want to sleep at night.
So welcome back to You Might Try This. We've been spending a lot of time in this podcast where one central idea tends to emerge over and over, and that is the thing that makes you exceptional early in your career can actually quietly become the ceiling that stops your ascent later. And so we've talked about the identity shift that comes with every new level. We've talked about the expert trap, staying in the doer mode after the job requirements have changed. And we've talked about what trust actually costs and also what it buys.
It's true. And every time, Cade, I think we get into these conversations, there's a version of that pattern, right? And sometimes I think we see it more in women than in men. And that's that it's kind of harder to name. It's this dynamic where if you're working really hard, but you can't quite figure out why you're not as successful as you want to be, that dynamic of, wait, I'm working hard. Why am I not getting what I thought I would or where I need to be?
Yeah, so today we're doing something different, right? It's the first time that we've brought in someone to speak with, and we're really excited about that because the person that we're bringing in has kind of named that dynamic. I mean, she nailed it. LaToya Jordan is an executive coach, someone that we've worked with closely. She's the host of her own podcast called She Leads and Succeeds. And she's been in the rooms that we've been talking about, first as an executive herself, and now as someone who's helping other people navigate those rooms. So LaToya, this is the first time we get to say welcome to You Might Try This.
Wow. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I think you're right. I'm someone who have this kind of conversation with women that I support in various ways. And also back in the days when I was an executive, I was a part of those conversations as we talked about folks who are trying so hard, perhaps, but not really elevating from a career perspective. So I'm really excited to share some of the things that I know to be true, quite frankly, in this space.
So when I said that you named it, I actually loved the name that you used. You talked about the good soldier. So can you tell us, how do you define what is the good soldier and why does it look like success? It sounds pretty good, right? Good soldier, yes. But you say it's actually a trap. So why is it, why does that happen? The fact that it looks like a success and yet you say it's a trap.
Yeah. And I named it that way on purpose, right? Because when you think about that word, the phrase, you're like, oh, I want to be that. And that's what happens, right? A person starts off just by really feeling the need to support their organization, right? To be dependable, to be the fixer, the executor, someone who says yes because they don't want anything to drop. They want the company to win, right? Same way you'd want the battle to be won or the war. And so you're like, put me in, I got this, right? And that's the posture that they take on to be in that good soldier mentality. But what happens in the trap of that, though, is that you become indispensable as an executor. You become indispensable as the person I can turn to clean up the mess or to do the thing, right? And that's actually being indispensable in the wrong way because the organization can't imagine you to do anything else. You are labeled that way and they see you that way. And quite frankly, it's extremely hard to get out of that box that you put yourself in. And what I like to call is you are boxed in by your own excellence in how you deliver and over deliver in being the executor. So that's
it's something that it's something that Stacey and I have called the expert trap. You get trapped into that expertise, and then people want to keep you there because you're so effective. But it's not necessarily the value that you're being asked to create any longer.
No, not at all.
It's interesting, LaToya. One of the things that I talk about with some of my clients is when they want to advance, that one of the things that they have to do is they have to find their own successor. And I think it gets at what you're saying right there, which is when you become invaluable to an organization and you serve a role, unless they see that that role can be replaced, they're not going to let you go. Right. And that's just how it happens. And so it is frustrating because there's a paradox, right? Where the better you are at something that the organization needs, people think, well, that will allow me to get out, but it really puts you in there deeper, doesn't it?
That's exactly right. You dig yourself a deeper hole, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Are there some ways that you see, I know you work with a lot of female clients where you see women being good soldiers, or the trap shows up different? Because I feel like I do notice that sometimes, but what have you seen?
Well, the thing that I see the most with women, and it comes from the best intentions and something that we often are really good at personally. And it's this idea around kind of the office housework. I think it's been kind of coined, right? And it's the thing that I see women do where they raise their hand to plan things, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're planners, we're organizers by nature or by nurture. That is how we show up. And so when an organization needs a retreat to be planned, or some big gala, or some networking event, or something, maybe a career development experience for the employees, they'll tap a woman to do that. Or the woman quickly raises their hand to do it because it's something they're good at, right? And they feel really proud of that. And so they see it as, I am supporting this important aspect of the business, which on its face is true. But what happens is that you're doing execution work that doesn't have you in the driver's seat. You're doing work that is someone giving you the thing to do and you're doing it, versus you coming up with the thing to do. You coming up with some strategic imperative or some innovative thing that will move the organization forward. You start to look more like an administrator, a support staff or something, and not as much that of a leader or someone that I can see in a light of being at a strategic planning meeting table, right? It's a nuance that often gets missed because from a woman's perspective, we're coming with our true heart's intention, right? We see this as an important thing that we want to do to support the business. But unfortunately, it sets us up to get so busy doing those things that we can't do the things that would be seen as strategic and would move us from a career perspective. And just one thing I would say as an add-on, you asked about it from a women's, my experience working with women. There's actually a study done that Harvard Business Review shared where women disproportionately take on these roles, right? And men are not raising their hands to plan the annual retreat. That women typically do that. And that's why it ends up being labeled like this housework thing, but it's something that is office related type of housework. And it really just does us a disservice because it fills our plate with the wrong types of activities and service to the organization.
So interesting.
It's such a provocative term too, isn't it? Office housework.
Of course.
You know, I could imagine that's quite provocative when women hear that. You know, you talk about women who raise their hand, they say yes. And yet you say that every yes that isn't strategic is actually a no when it comes to your own growth and development. How did that land, you know, when your clients first heard you say that?
Yeah, you know, I would say 9 times out of 10, shock and awe. Right? Because they are like, what do you mean? This important person asked me and I'm doing this amazing work. And they're just so thrilled and proud, quite frankly. You know, you women, and I work mostly with women, so I'll speak it from that perspective. They work really hard to get to that level, right? Where they have a seat at this table. And so if this very even more senior leader, maybe a C-suite person asks them to do something, they're like, of course this is going to be career building. Of course. What are you talking about? And I'm like, okay, well, let's walk it back. Walk it back with me, friend. And I'll ask them, like, tell me how you planning the retreat is going to lead to kind of a feather in your career development cap. And when I say that, it's just like, they're like, and you can see them like in their head, like, okay, I hired the caterer. No, that's not it. Wait, no. Like they're just like doing it, the mental math in their head, and they realize, oh, shoot, you're right. And I'm like, yeah. And it makes me feel bad because I hate to like pull that, curtain from their eyes, because they, again, really are excited and feel honored to have been asked by this senior person. But what they don't realize is that it is absolutely going to fill their plate with work that is not strategic. And so how might you make some adjustments, learn when to say no in the most polite, political way possible so that you can have more room? So instead of planning the strategic, the offsite or the retreat, you're planning the strategic 5-year plan in a small tiger team that's making those decisions. They're not going to ask you to be on that tiger team because they're going to be like, oh, Beth's too busy planning the retreat. And if you knew that, you'd be like, no, I want to plan, but it's too late because you're too busy looking for the caterer. So that's kind of how it shows up, Cade. And they get so sad when I say it. And honestly, they just start to feel a little bit like they're being used. So I have to walk that back. Like, okay, calm down. It's not that bad. But what we have to do and work together around is how do we be more strategic in what we say yes to, and what we say, how might I find someone else to support that initiative because I'm, in these other spaces in that way. So that's kind of how it shows up.
It's interesting, LaToya. I think that, there's always this debate on, well, do women get into the situation because they did it themselves, right? Like, well, they raised their hand. Yes. Well, there's some of that, but then there's also the expectation, like you said, from the Harvard Business Review study. One of the things I'm curious is, how do you coach women? And then I'll ask you, there's one story you told and I want you to share it with us. But before we get to that, I want you to talk about saying no, because it is really, really hard. And what's interesting is I'm going to take a tangent here, which is I find a lot of the female clients I have now actually are talking about how they're trying to do the same thing at home. Right. So, they're trying to say no, right, on multiple fronts. Like, no, I don't want to do all the housework at home and I don't want to do all the housework at work. There's a book out now called Fair Play, which is a whole process of how do you work with your partner to divide housework more equitably. But all of these things get into things like boundaries and saying no. So what have you seen and how do you coach your clients around? How do you say no at work?
Yes, first of all, that resonated for me in every single way possible, Stacey. And not only have we done that fair play exercise, my husband and I, but so I know that worked well. But a friend of mine is like coining this phrase, like the whole let them, like, let's do that more at home. So yeah, I totally get it. I think that the way in which I work with leaders around this is that there are certain things that you're going to have to say yes to. But in the times that you do have to say yes, how can you find a slither of that will allow you to show up in a different light than just the executor, than just the fixer? Can you create just one through line that they can see you differently in that work? So that's one way, because I do recognize that there are sometimes you just can't say no. Mm-hmm. But in the times when, and I want you to really assess whether or not you can't say no or not, because often that's just more you than the reality.
Old stories.
Right. Yeah. There are times when you really can say no. And so for me, what I coach my leaders around is offer something. So it's not just no, can't do it. It's not that clean at work. It's not really that clean at home either, but you know what I'm saying? But instead what I say is like, how can you help them find someone else or reassort your work such that maybe that can line up to something important for you. So for example, what I would say to them is go back to this retreat idea. I have this really important deliverable that I know is due in Q3, and I know that the retreat is right around then. So I wonder if I can help you find someone else to do that work, because I really need to focus my team and my efforts on that. That's one. Two is, I know part of my work is around, I don't know, engagement or something like that. And I can see how if I can add this element to the retreat, then maybe we can build out some strategic engagement initiative relative to that. And that way it's showing that you are thinking more holistically and more strategically about the work and not just hiring caterers, hiring whomever. But I want you to see this as, where's the business connection to this that you can lead? And then it becomes something that perhaps you can connect with your boss and say, hey, I did this element, right? And I really would love your feedback on this piece of the work, because I know that's something we're looking for me to grow in, right? But if you just take the work and say yes or no at face value, you're missing the opportunity to, one, create the boundary, because the boundary is leadership. The boundary is saying yes when you need to say yes, and no when it actually is not an appropriate for where you're trying to be from a leadership perspective and a leadership presence perspective. But like I said, what I get excited about is when I can help my clients find that connection to a competency they're trying to develop or some goal that their leader has asked them to focus on. If you can connect those dots, then there's a win-win in that.
I mean, LaToya, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm hearing you say, look, you might say and context matters so much in all of these conversations. You might say, look, if I'm going to plan the retreat, if I'm going to help you plan the retreat, I want to own the agenda.
Yeah. Well said. Yes.
How do you elevate yourself inside of that? Right. So now I've got the strategy of what are the important messages? What do people need to hear? Who's best equipped to deliver those messages? Right. So I'm not just going to be the one receiving all of the orders from the person doing the cool work of planning the agenda. Give me the whole thing. Yep. Now you're inviting more work, but to your point, if you see that as significant value add and you think the exposure is going to be worth it, then that's perhaps a worthwhile response. Again, context matters.
Right. And that, I mean, and we can go deeper on that in a second, but that is where I'm saying really think about it and take that appropriate audit of, is that really going to move the needle?
As opposed to the reflexive habitual yes, which so many people do. Gotcha.
Exactly. Yeah.
LaToya, you told a story once about a woman who was in actually I think a kind of a OD role in a company, right? She was in org effectiveness, and you explained that she was taking notes in every meeting, and that is kind of to this point. There was a way that she transformed her role and how she was seen, and she used it as an opportunity. Can you tell that story? Because I really like that story.
Yeah, it was a colleague of mine, to your point, that was in the org effectiveness space, and they were doing some deep research in the organization. And so they were interviewing so many people, and she was tasked to be alongside the vice president to take notes, to really synthesize the work and do kind of the share out, the electronic share out she would give to her boss, the VP, who then would send it out. And over time, we would talk and, I was like, hey, how's it going? She was like, it's great. I'm just, I'm taking the notes. And I was like, well, what's your contribution? Like, what you doing? And she was kind of like, I'm giving the notes to her and she sends the emails. And I was like, okay, but you're a senior too. Is there a way for you to insert yourself? She's like, no, there's no way. And I was like, okay, well, just think about it. Like, is there a moment or just something? Because you're in all these meetings with all these, C-suite folks, and this should be something you can do. And so one day, someone in the conversation asked a question and folks were just a little stumped. And she just shared a perspective from what she had noticed in all these varied interviews. And there was a connection that she wanted to offer. And it was almost like they were like, who said that? Because they were not used to her talking. That she was just, on the side, click, 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 and away. And she had this really important, unique perspective. And they were like, whoa, wait. Say more. Well, what do you mean by that? And she got it was almost like she was, the veil was lifted from where she was sitting and they could see her, and she became a part of the conversation. And it was she said it was such a cool thing because she had all the thoughts. She just had never been invited to the conversation. And even in that moment, she hadn't been invited, but the silence gave her space to say, well, this is something I noted that perhaps can connect to the conversation. So that really changed how they saw her. It changed the posture in which she was kind of doing that work. And she stopped just being a good soldier and started to be like an observer that they could see more strategically that could add value to the room. And that really, really changed things. And I think I joked and said something like, she opened up her mouth one time and then it all just like changed for her. And she got invited to more of those conversations because not only did they see her in that moment as strategic, but they was like, oh, she's actually quite good at this. Like, we should put her on more things where she takes a more vocal lead on things. And it changed her trajectory in her work and org effectiveness.
That's fascinating. It's such a great
interesting,
example.
isn't it? I mean, she was sitting on the information. The opportunity was there all along. It was just how she was willing to actually see herself in addition to then how others saw her.
Yeah.
LaToya, so let's imagine someone is a good soldier. They realize that they are a task taker and they want to be more of the agenda setter. How does one make that transition without blowing up their reputation or their credibility in the meantime? If you suddenly start saying no, and you've alluded to this, it doesn't always just have to be a hard no, but let's talk a little bit more about how do you make that transition without damaging yourself in the process?
Yeah. And that's an important thing to consider. I think the first thing I always tell folks is to really audit the work that is being asked of you, right? Is it, this huge amount of effort with low visibility? Are you the person taking notes in the room that no one's supposed to see? Or, is it something that you're saying yes to do when you don't really need to say yes? Like, really be honest with yourself. And if you have to, talk to someone, and have someone that is a sounding board for you, because sometimes you can't get out of your own way of thinking. So that's a huge part for me, is to sit there and look at all the things I've said yes to. And was that high effort, low visibility, or where was it on the matrix? So that's part one. And then part two, I would say, ask questions before you say yes. I think we always just get so excited to be asked that we automatically say, yes, I'll do it. And I just love for the folks to just start by saying, I'm curious, like, what made you think of me? Like, what about, my work scope, the things that I'm working on from a competency perspective or some other way? Like, what about this made you think of me? And honestly, this does a couple of things. One, it buys you some time that you don't have to just have this knee jerk yes. But the other is it will signal to you how someone is thinking of you. And that will add to that audit. Oh, they are thinking that this is a strategic piece of work that I can work on. That's one thing. Or they see me as a fixer and an executor. Then they need a fixer and an executor. Then you know that that's stuff you're going to need to start saying no to. If you can't, like I said earlier, if you can't say no right away, I get that. But we want you to really start to at least be aware of what's on your plate and what were things that are given to you because they see you as an executor versus things that they're really trying to grow you or prepare you for the next thing. So those are some of the things. And then I think the other pieces that we've kind of already talked about, how might you reframe it? If you can't say no right away, how might you reframe it? And things like that. So those are some of the ways in which I work with folks on that. Yeah.
LaToya, you mentioned early on that not only do you coach people, but you were kind of in the role and you were an executive when you heard people talking about succession and you heard how other leaders talked about, selecting people for new opportunities or moving up. What, are kind of some of the things you've learned, or how have you started to take those experiences so that you can help others think about what is career advancement mean and what gets said and how do they think about, let's say, strategic thinking, for example?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I try to offer clients is that experience that I had in the room and where I heard people talk this way. And one of the key pieces was if a person is seen as strategic, they're using language like, oh, they're willing to take risks. Look at that project they worked on. And yes, it was a little, gnarly or challenging, but look how they took that risk. Like they're speaking to them in this energetic way, around what's possible with them, right? What types of projects can we, do we need this innovative, lens or, whatever the case is, these types of phrases that are being used, for leaders that they see in a strategic way. Whereas when they're talking about someone that is a good soldier, it's more, hey, I think she would be a great person to kind of be interim and hold the seat while we look for XYZ. Or, I think, we're planning to move such and such out. I think she can be in that spot. Isn't that the same kind of role she's in now? Yeah, but let's just move her over there. It's kind of like moving chess pieces, but that one is not one where we're using in a way to like really get somewhere. It's just like placeholder movement, right? And it's, we used to call it, steady Eddies or steady Edwinas, that just people who we knew can just be steady. They'll go with the flow. They'll do what's asked. They're not going to make waves, but they're also not going to make business waves, right? They're just steady. And those people are never tapped for a promotion in those kind of conversations. They're tapped for movement, probably across the chessboard. But I don't remember a conversation that we had with someone. I take that back. One time we had a succession conversation, and there was this person who we had in a lot of different spots. And I remember asking the question, like, how's this going to work, you all? They're like, yeah, that's just a person that we know we could put anywhere. And I was like, huh. And if I was their coach, I'd be like, that's actually not what you want. Like, you kind of need to be known for a thing. And it's like when you're known for everything, you're known for nothing. And so that was kind of one of those, that's what I mean by these steady folks, these soldiers. They're just known to they could do anything. And that's not the brand you actually want when you're trying to kind of move up in the executive space.
It's interesting because I think early in your career, being a generalist gives you access to opportunities and access to relationships. But what you're talking about is where that shift happens, and just being a generalist doesn't matter. And you need to be able to build a brand so that you have a good fit and you can have access to greater responsibility. And I think that's a shift for people, isn't it? It's a shift in strategy. And sometimes it happens too late because you don't get an email that says, hey, by the way, you've been working here long enough. You need to move from being a generalist to building your brand. No one tells you. It just sort of sneaks up, doesn't it?
No one tells you. And that is the thing that I think is the hardest for me, to share with folks, because they're like, oh my gosh, you mean I wasted all this time? But to your point, not even in any leadership development that I've ever even designed or worked on, do we get that like detailed of like, hi, now it's time for you to elevate in this way and focus in this way, right? That's not what we do. And so everyone misses that nuance, and they spend time in the wrong place. And so I agree with you. No one shares that level of detail with them.
LaToya, you know that our goal for this podcast, You Might Try This, is to give people some practical experiments that they could run. Yeah. We do recognize that context for people differs so widely that we don't like anything to be overly prescriptive. Experiments, if you will. And so if someone were listening to this and she hears herself painted by this conversation, she realizes she's been the good soldier. She actually seeking more from her career than just office housework. Like what might be some experiments that she could run? What could she actually do starting this week, let's say?
Yeah. I love that. So in addition to what we've already kind of talked about so far around auditing, that's my favorite thing.
I do love that, by the way. Like high effort, low visibility. If you're working on that stuff, you ought to know about it.
Yes, just be aware.
And be harsh on yourself, right? Like, don't give yourself extra credit. If it's actually low visibility, you should name it like that, right?
Yes, right. Yeah. And it might feel shameful, but that's important for you to know. Like, feel in your body. How does it feel for you as you do this, right? So I think that's number one thing. If you do nothing else after you hear this podcast, do that one. But then I think the other thing is to have a little courage and say no to one thing. Just one thing. Over the rest of the quarter. I mean, I'd love for you to do it even more, but like, just try to say no to one ask that's given to you. Particularly if you've done that audit and you see what you see, then really push yourself to say no to something. I mean, and I think the last thing I would offer, and this is something I tease my clients around, is sit on your hands at a meeting. Right? Like, and I mean that literally or figuratively, do what you will with it. But again, because if you know you are prone to saying yes for all the right reasons, but you done heard this podcast and you see the detriment that it could have on your career, sit on your hands, wear a rubber band, and just pluck yourself to death when they're asking for volunteers to, to sign up for XYZ. Just Just be like,
Don't do it.
Not me. If you could just do those 3 things, I think you will come out with less on your plate that are execution focused, and which will give you the space you need to have more things that would align to where you want to go in your career. So I think I'll just say those 3 for now.
I love those. You know what? I just thought of something that I've not thought of in a long time. When you think about low visibility, high effort. I lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years and I had a number of jobs.
Uh-oh.
And I actually had a stint in PR for MGM. MGM was launching a cable channel in Hong Kong. And one of their big assets at the time was Pink Panther. And I remember I was at this big trade show and the execs were there. And you know what I was doing? I was helping the guy get dressed in his Pink Panther costume. And I remember having such a moment when I was zipping the back of that Pink Panther costume up. I remember thinking, my career's not going where I thought it would go.
I don't know if that's both. I think that's is that low visibility, low effort, but bad anyway? I don't know what that is, but that seems bad.
I mean, that's easy enough. That's easy enough. But I'm like, the executives over there, and here I'm zipping this dude up in a Pink Panther costume.
Oh my gosh.
That
is high visibility for a way that you don't want to have high visibility.
Thank you for reminding me of that low point in my career.
I love it. I could do some too. There's a lot of coffee that I brought a lot of people, and I don't make great coffee. So I always was like, really, you don't want to ask me. I mean, whatever. But I know I'm the young woman in the room. I think there's one thing you said earlier. I actually wrote down, I have my little notebook here and I'm writing notes as we're talking. And it was about the ask questions before you say yes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that actually in other places in my life too. It's like this desire, it's like a reflex. Like when someone asks me, because I like to be helpful, it's part of my identity, right? I want to help others, makes me feel good about myself. So it's almost reflexive. Like I'm just going to say yes. And that piles up. And the pause of, I think you said the question was, why did you think of me for that? And I'm like, ooh, that's a good one. Good question. Yes.
And you can do that at home too. If you have a, significant, I'm like, well, what made you think that I'd be the right one for the dishes? So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Right? Like whatever the case is, but it illuminates a lot.
I just want someone to tell me that they just so admire my dishwashing skills that they just feel that no one is as good as I am at moving it from the sink into the dishwasher. Right. That's like my new skill set. Well, LaToya, first of all, I just want to say, thank you. I think, you've really captured kind of a nuance of what we're trying to do with this podcast, which is helping people understand why leadership can be so disorienting. There's so much that happens to us. And Cade and I talk a lot about this there are a lot of reasons people feel lonely in the world today. But one of the things is that leadership is disorienting. And these things happen that nobody told us. And you've given us some great insights around what are things people can do so that they're aligning where they want to go in their career with serving the organization that they are a part of. And I think everybody wins when you do that, right? That's what we want is alignment of what are my strengths and how can I serve this organization, but not getting off track because, the requests that don't line up with that. So super, super appreciate, LaToya, some of your insights here.
And LaToya, before we go, where can people find you? Where can they follow your work? And how do they listen to She Leads and Succeeds?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, as with everyone, right? So you can find me on there, and She Leads and Succeeds are on both Apple and Spotify. So you can find me in all those kind of spaces.
Excellent.
And thank you all for having me. This was such a great conversation. So
thank you for being with us. The gratitude's from us. Thank you, and thanks for listening. We'll see you all next time. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to You Might Try This, brought to you by EDC and Edgewise Media. To learn more about the podcast, visit youmightTryThis.com or connect with us on social media.